Welcome back to Vancouver Carpenter. Today we're going to go over 8 different methods you could use to skim coat a textured ceiling. Each one of these will have its pros and cons, and I will go over all of them. But first I want to say a quick shout out to Brixton. Brixton is the painting contractor who has contracted this job to me. And if you are looking to get some interesting work done, check out his page. You can see he does a lot of, gold leaf and plasters and painting. And again, big thank you, Brixton. So back to the regular scheduled programming. So there's a lot of different ways that somebody could go about this, and I will be trying to show only viable methods. So not every single conceivable way, but all of the ways that somebody is likely to try and the pros and cons to each method. So the first thing we're going to start with is pan and knife. So I am not a pan and knife guy, but I will try and show you some of the pros and cons here. So when dipping into the pan, one of the biggest cons is you've got the mud right out to the edges of the blade. So what tends to happen when you try and do your first pull here is it will drip off the edges of the knife. So a solution to that a lot of people do is they will wipe off the corners of the knife. That's fine, but it does seem like an extra motion, and it's also pretty hard on the wrist to be pushing the material across like this. It does have some plus sides. I don't think I'm going to go much further than this, to be honest, because I'm finding this so annoying to try and do, wiping off the corners, and I only get about half the distance on my spread. You also have to have your mud kind of thin just to keep it workable. But yeah, this is painful for me too, not just you guys. Trust me. The good thing about a knife is it's pretty easy to get into the corners, like so. And I can do the same thing with the trowel. I'm making a mess. I'm so not proficient with this tool. When it's easy to get into the corners is right here. So I can very easily and controllably get that. I definitely didn't put enough mud onto this. I think we'll have to restart with our next method. But I would say if you're proficient with a pan and knife, you'll be able to do it way faster and way better. But let's get to a hawk and trowel. That's how I really like to do it. So yeah, I really don't think a pan and knife is an ideal tool for skimming large areas. In this case, I got some mud on the hawk and I got a 16-inch trowel as opposed to a 12-inch knife. So I'm just gonna start spreading it. Yeah, I can get that last 6 inches in one spread. Definitely a little easier. And I might not get the full spread here, but so one thing I do is I always put it on this way and come back this way to help reduce bubbles. Let's just pull a little bit of that. So you can definitely see that like a trowel is definitely better for large, broad spaces. Now, I have a crumb in my mud. That's always annoying. Take the extra I had and finish off that little space. Anyways, let's do this again. Okay, so we got one line here. And to get into the corner, I always just use my 6-inch knife, which I keep in the same hand that I'm holding the hawk. So that's a pretty good proficient method. In fact, I often do this in place of a lot of the ones I'm about to show you. But let's get to the next method, which would be hawk and knife. So I do think that hawk and knife has some advantages, and that is simply just placement of the mud blob. It's not right out to the edges, so you can more controllably spread the stuff without dripping it off the edges. I still find it a slow and awkward way to do it, but the learning curve on a knife is way faster than a trowel. I'm sure if I spent the time using knives more often, I could spread it more efficiently because I would slowly develop the muscles to do so. But I have developed the muscles for trowels, not knives, as is very apparent. Okay, that's enough of that. If I even have enough mud on here. But yeah, I think that this is a good method of using a knife, but I still don't think that a knife and a trowel is actually a good method for skimming out a ceiling, because the application of the mud is still too slow. So one of the downsides to using a hawk and a knife is that it's hard to clean off the buildup right there as you're always going like this. So you tend to get a little crummier and crustier. But let's get to the next method, which is a roller and a knife. So on this method, we are just gonna take a paint roller. This is, I think, maybe a 1/2 inch nap roller. The nap of the roller isn't as important because it just gets covered in mud. It's more how you use it. So as you can see, I've got it all covered in mud there. And I now have the super fun and messy job of applying the mud to the ceiling. I don't like this method because of how messy it is. However, I believe that this is actually the best method for the DIY or the contractors that are trying to do some of their own mud work. Point proven right there. Takes a bit to get the swing of it before you stop dropping 6-inch pigeon blobs. But yeah, seriously though, I have done this a ton and it still happens to me from time to time. That was my first pass. So once the mud gets worked into the roller, it tends to stay on the ceiling and on the roller a little better. But yeah, at first it can be pretty messy. You're also gonna get splattered in mud, which I am right now and I'm not enjoying very much. It gets easier, I promise. The nice thing about this method though is it very easily applies a pretty uniform coat, which is what most beginners struggle with, is getting that kind of uniform coat. It also is really good at working out the bubbles. Now, I don't usually like to do this on my first coat because I can apply my first coat very quickly and efficiently with a hawk and trowel. I like to do this on my second coat when the bubbles get intense, because I find that's when it has the most benefits. So as you can see, using a knife makes it really easy to just get a nice, smooth and pretty flat surface. So I think that a pan and knife with a roller is absolutely the most user-friendly method to do this job. So the next one would be, well, roller plus hawk and trowel. It's not actually a bad method. Okay, check this out. 20-inch trowel. So I have actually used this method a lot, and that is roll out a huge swath. I should have gone wider, but I actually want to get back to doing this my preferred way. But I thought I'd show you guys this method. The 20-inch trowel just does a really good job of smoothing it out. And if you are proficient with trowels, this can be a very effective way to do it, because you can go a long way between liftoffs and leave just generally a very nice flat surface. So I love this method. I use it a lot, at least I used to, until I stopped wanting to use the roller altogether. But we're not quite done using the roller, so we're gonna do one last thing with it before we get on to some of the other methods. Okay, next we get into skimming blades. So as you can see, I got this nice handle with a big flat blade on here that has some flex to it that's really good at skimming this stuff out. So the downside here is now we're starting to get into investing into more expensive tools as opposed to just a pan and the knife, which ultimately will do the same job. It just won't do it quite as quickly. So if you're a professional, definitely investing in something like this is worth it. But it does have some downsides too, and we'll get into those in a bit after we see how it does up there. So this is a 32-inch one, which is pretty big. I actually like a 24, even though I don't have one. Okay, I haven't done this in a while, so forgive me. But it really I actually don't have the angle right, so let's adjust that. I had it a bit too flat, so I couldn't put the pressure in the right place. So generally, it leaves it very flat, but as you can see, over such a big space, it can't get into the dips and hollows, so you kind of have to go back. Let's do one more back here. I mean, it's pretty darn good though, and it's so fast. And it really has a lot of wow factor to it. So cleaning it off is a little bit annoying. Not a total pain, but not as fast as a swipe of a trowel on a hawk. And at the end of the day, we are still left with the mess of using a roller. I hate how messy my buckets get from doing this. And I honestly just can't stand the mess on the floor. Drives me crazy. And other than the spots where it just can't put enough pressure like that, it generally does a really nice job. Not perfect, but very fast and quite flat. But at the end of the day, I feel like I have better control with the trowel, and I can more evenly put the pressure where it needs to be and get a flatter looking, more bubble-free finish when I use a trowel. So I actually like this, and in this case right here, I'm using a 16-inch trowel, which is great because it's pretty wide, but it doesn't put too much or too little pressure on. Yeah, 16-inch trowel is actually a really, really nice width for doing a roll and skim. And sometimes you just got to get the knife on there to get rid of the little stuff. And one thing skimming blades are absolutely not effective at is getting right into the corners. So a lot of the time when I've used skimming blades, what I do is I just go around the whole room and I don't worry about the corners, and I tune them up by hand like this after. I find it's a lot faster than messing around trying to get that thing in the corner, because you only cause yourself grief by trying to get it perfect with a skimming blade. So let's get on to some of these other methods. So one of the best methods is actually using a sprayer and then a skimming blade. So you really thin the mud down and you spray it through a machine like a Graco. I don't have one, so that's why I can't show you, but you spray it all on and then you walk on, and then you walk along dragging this guy. So that one is really effective. The downside to that is there's usually a lot of protection involved. Like you have to go around the room with poly and plastic, especially around windows and all sorts of stuff. So it's very labor intensive in the beginning, but then the process of actually spraying and skimming goes very quickly. So in my opinion, that's probably the most professional one. However, there is a new method that I personally am really interested in, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, and that is drywall robots. Yes, I'm serious. The robots are coming for your job. Do you really want it that bad? Seriously, skimming sealing sucks. But yeah, these machines can actually spray on the joint compound. They spray it on so perfectly, apparently. They then just come back with like a Festool Plain-X type sander and sand it down. So I'm actually really interested in something like that long term. Like if they could make those small enough to get into a residential building, you know, a job like this, where really all you kind of have to do is protect some of the things that need protecting, and then you set the robot free on the job. Like, yeah, I'm interested in that, because this work is so hard on your neck and shoulders that I think if we can automate it some way, I think it's all the better. Anyways, I'm sure that'll be very cost prohibitive for a long time. And in the meantime, I think you got your job security, drywall dudes. Don't worry about it. Now that we are done that, I can go back to my preferred method of getting this job done, which is strap on the old stilts. My knee is finally feeling good enough to use these again. I tore my meniscus about 1.5 years ago, and I just didn't feel stable or steady on stilts after that. I didn't tear it on stilts, I did it skateboarding, as most of you probably could have figured out, the ones that have been following long enough to see what I do in my spare time. But yeah, so I've got a couple of buckets of mud on a cart to be able to easily move it around. 16-inch trowel, Hawk, a nice full bucket of mud, and a clear space is very important when working on stilts. Get this a little more out of the way, and right back to it. So had I not been filming a video, this is what I would have been doing the whole time, because I just find that sometimes you spend more time dragging more tools up and around. And sometimes the old school methods, in the long run, when you add up all the extra time and expense, end up not being that bad after all. So yeah, let me know in the comments, what's your preferred method for skimming out a ceiling? I really like doing it this way, at least on the first coat. Sometimes you just have to get the ruler out on the second coat because the bubbles get so bad without it, but nothing a little elbow grease can't solve. Get right into the corners here. Yeah, I sometimes just find having less tools in my hand, less tools to bring up to the job, less tools to clean, less tools to spend money on in the long run, just ends up being cheaper and faster. Go figure. But you do have to have the trowel skills if you want to roll that way. And I definitely find that the finished result uses less mud, especially because half of it isn't going on the floor. It uses less mud and ends up being a little more precise. So you guys, that is 8 different ways to skim a ceiling. This is my preferred way. I hope you guys are doing awesome. Again, big thanks to Brixton for letting me film on this job. And thanks for watching Vancouver Carpenter. I mean, okay, we'll call it Vancouver Drywaller today, but whatever. Hope you guys are doing well. Till the next one. I got a ceiling to finish, so have a good one.